morning, everyone. I'm Nicolas Loof. I'm a senior application scientist at BDB Informatic, former FlowJo. You have my email address here, nicolas.loof@bd.com. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any question. If you need technical support, you can also email flowjo@bd.com. It's written here. So today's talk of this webinar is going to be, I've got a UMAP and cluster, now what? Completing the high dimensional analysis workflow in FlowJo software. So usually when you start doing your clustering, people can get to this point and they get the UMAP, they get the cluster, and they have this pretty picture, but they don't really know what to do with it. So let's try to answer this question today. So if you don't remember how to get this picture, here's the 9-step basically for a high dimensional workflow. So the steps that have already been done, and I'm not gonna talk today, are normalization, data QC, annotation, concatenation, dimensional reduction, and clustering. The one we're gonna focus in this talk are phenotyping, comparison, and isolation. So the first step, phenotyping, is basically your annotation. So you have your different experiment conditions, so stimulated, non-stimulated, different type of tissue, different time points. So what we've done in FlowJo in the annotation, we put those conditions as a keyword. And those keywords, when we did the concatenation, we included those keywords and we transformed those keywords into a parameter. So now in my phenotyping here, I can split back my sample based on my condition based on this keyword. And in this example here, I gate based on my different type of tissues. So I have my keyword 1, which is my lymph node, my keyword 2, which my liver, keyword 3 was my spleen, and keyword 4 was my blood. So I can gate between each different condition. I can preview on my t-SNE those different conditions and see which cluster are changing, overexpressed, underexpressed, based on each different tissue in this case. And after I can just identify the cluster that change based on the condition and just focus on those cluster. But we have cluster number. Right now, the only thing we have is cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, or if you use FlowSum, cluster 1, etc. So how can I characterize those cluster and transform that random name to something that's more meaningful biologically? So maybe a CD4 T cells, a Treg, or whatever your cell population are. And we're gonna use Cluster Explorer. And Cluster Explorer now in version 10.9 is built-in into FlowJo, so it's not plugins anymore. So you just have to go in your workspace in the population tab, and you're gonna see with t-SNE, now you're gonna see a Cluster Explorer. When you click on Cluster Explorer, it's gonna open all those windows. So you're gonna have a graph windows, histogram with the number of cells per cluster, a heat map, and a different set of cluster. So Cluster Explorer is really an easy tool to really characterize your population. You're gonna be able to do gate on your different marker, and it's gonna highlight the different cluster that have this marker present. You can do AND gate, NOR gate. You can preview that on 2D plot, etc. Just click on your t-SNE, on your UMAP, and you're gonna really see the expression of each of your marker. So really nice tool. There's already a talk on Cluster Explorer, a really detailed talk. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time today. I'm just gonna show you in the live demo. We're gonna see all the different functions. But on this PowerPoint slide, I'm just gonna go really briefly. Also on Cluster Explorer, what you can do, you can compare your different conditions. So on your heat map, you are, of course, have your different cluster as a row and your different marker as a column, but you can add additional column with your condition. And we're going to tell you if this population is overexpressed or underexpressed in your condition. So if it's yellow, that means this cluster is really well represented in this condition, and when it's blue, that means it's underrepresented in that condition. So here between the no steam and steam, we can see that the population 0 is mostly constituted from no steam cells, cells coming from the no steam condition, and vice versa, population 6 to 14, the cluster are mostly present in the steam. So all the cells from this population coming from a steam condition. So everything here is manual, and we realized in FlowJo that we wanted to make things a little bit easier and maybe have something a little bit more automatic. So in the new version of FlowJo that was released a few months ago, we have now this MEM native as in your population. You can have an option MEM. And MEM stands for marker enrichment modeling, and is a quantitative relative enrichment by magnitude and anthropometric range. What it means was, by the way, published in Nature Method by Dingling and all. It's from the Irish lab. And basically, what this MEM does, it's just gonna put a score in your population for each your different marker based on a reference on population. So you're gonna have your marker, you're gonna have if it's positive or negative. Sometimes it can be a negative based on your reference population if this reference population is positive for that marker. And you're gonna have a vector of positivity. So you can have a vector from 1 all the way to 10. Okay, so 10, that means you really have a great separation between your negative and positive. If you have a 1, that means your population are usually pretty close to your negative. And here it can be just by all your cells or specific reference. So that's lets you score directly your cluster. So instead of now having just a random number, cluster 1 to 26 in this case, I can really have a set of marker and to know the positivity of this marker. So for example, cluster of CD5 positive with a vector of 3 of positivity, followed by a CD45 positive with a vector of 2, etc., etc. If I take cluster 10, a CD5 positive vector of 4, CD11C a positive of 1, etc. And I can manually, or in my mind as a biologist, can label those cells automatically, saying, okay, if they're positive for that marker, I know which cell population they are. And because we have those labels, now what we can do if we think this list is way too big for us, that's way too many markers and have a lot of markers that are not relevant, I can just put a threshold on those labels and say, instead of having a threshold of a vector of 1 of positivity, I want a vector of 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 10, and really shrink my list of the list of markers that are positive. And now in this example, we have TRX cluster 1 is just my CD5 positive, CD45 positive, CD20, and I know the cells I'm talking about. If there's nothing, if your threshold is too low, it's just gonna say that there's no marker inclusion that follow the threshold that you mentioned. Now that we have the name, because usually when you do clustering, you are probably gonna over cluster. So you're gonna have a cluster that represent the same cell population, but because of this naming, of this MEM score naming, they're gonna have the same label between each cluster. And we can just tell MEM to merge those clusters together and create just a one cluster that will group cluster maybe 1, 10, 20 in this case, that have the exact same score for MEM. So make it really easy now to label your different population. Another tool, I think one of my most favorite one, I guess, since the release is T-Rex. And T-Rex, in my mind, it's a little bit like a pipeline. And this T-Rex tool, T-Rex plugin, what it's gonna do is gonna run a dimension reduction and a clustering algorithm automatically for you. And what is gonna really be the big difference by just doing manually, it's just gonna identify the area of differences between the different biological conditions and just create a cluster around those area of differences. So it's not just gonna cluster everything, it's just gonna really focus on where or which cells population change or appear, disappear, and really just gonna cluster this cell population and show you those cluster instead of showing you maybe 20 clusters, it's gonna show you 5 or 6. All right, so I have a question so I've noticed that marker enriched modeling, sometimes you may have a plus or minus slide. Yeah, so it just, okay, going back, you're correct, is something that we need to correct here. For example, cluster 9, we have CD5 plus minus 3. That means the is a negative thing. The plus is going to be removed from in the newest version, in the new 10.9.1 version that's going to be released in fall. But yeah, that means just it's defined with a negative vector of 3. After merge a cluster, can you use Cluster Expert to merge the cluster? In Cluster Explorer, you cannot merge a cluster. You can visualize the different cluster. So, but yes, you can look at them. Yeah. All right, back to T-Rex. So T-Rex, as I say, creates a cluster, but only on the population that change between the different conditions. Right now, T-Rex is limited to only 2 conditions, so positive, negative, or sorry, stimulated, not stimulated, or 2 time points, or 2 whatever condition. So he's been part of this publication from Jonathan Irish Lab and supervised by machine learning revealed key immune cell subset in COVID. Rush you to read the paper if you want to know more, but I'm gonna try to explain during this talk. So how T-Rex works. So when you open the T-Rex plugin, you're gonna have to select your different parameter that you want to include. You're gonna select your 2 conditions, so condition 1, condition 2. Then you're gonna change your K number. So if you increase your K number, you're gonna decrease the number of clusters you're gonna create. If you decrease the K number, you're gonna increase the number of clusters you want to create. You can change the epsilon number as well. And after you can create your bin. So T-Rex gonna create 4 bins. So the first 2, so from change from 0 to 5%, change from 5 to 15%, and here from 85 to 95%, and 95 to 100%. And that's the change that's gonna take in consideration. Everything is between 15 to 85% of self-representation in one or the other condition is not gonna take that into consideration. That's the default. You can change those number and those range the way you want. Then you can decide if you want to create a UMAP or a t-SNE. And if you create a t-SNE, you can change your t-SNE parameters, so the perplexity and the iteration. So when you run that, it's gonna give you this result where it's showing you that in these 2 conditions, so ACLL and CLL, you can see that those clusters right here in dark blue are represented by 95% from the ACLL cells, compared to the red one are represented mostly by the ACLL cells. And after, it's going to create the different cluster, and you can characterize those different cluster. You can characterize this different cluster, of course, with Cluster Explorer, or if you want, just by doing color-coded multi-graph and see what marker they express each of those clusters. All right, so now you have identified the cells or the cluster of interest, but what you have is just a series of, it's just a cluster, so just island on your t-SNE on your EMAP. How can you get back to a series of 2D plots to be able to sort this population? And we're gonna do that using the HyperFunder plugins. And HyperFunder really gonna try to look at all the different n-by-n combination, try to see where your cells of interest or your cluster is located on this n-by-n, draw a gate around this population. And after, I'm just gonna minimize or remove any redundant gate to find the best path, the fastest path as possible to find this cell population. So it's gonna do it by two steps. So first, a training step of the algorithm, which are characterized by those green cells, and after a red step, which is the validation, where it's gonna try with a set of samples to see where they fall exactly into the gate and make sure that you get a good purity. With this validation step, you're gonna get a output, the recall, the precision, and the F1 score is gonna give you if this path is the best as possible, and how pure is gonna be your sample. It's gonna give you an output in FlowJo with a series of 2D gates in FlowJo, and now because FlowJo is part of BD, you're gonna be able to export this HyperFunder path directly to FACSDiva. If you're having Discovery S8, so you're using Chorus, now you can also import directly your FlowJo workspace into Chorus, and you will find all the gate automatically. So great, you found your cell of population, you sorted it, maybe hopefully you publish your data, or it was just a clinical samples, and we are 6 months from now, a few months from now, and someone come with a new set of sample, and you have to do the analysis of the sample to see if they match or are different compared to what you discovered earlier. Before, we had to restart from scratch. We have to redo the analysis from dimensional reduction, clustering, etc., because of the nature of the algorithm. You had to restart from the beginning. We realized that FlowJo, that was a big issue, and so since version 10.9, we have a solution for you that you don't have to start from the beginning, but you can just add more sample to your current analysis. And that solution is called Embed. And Embed is a method of calculating the dimensional reduction or clustering value on a new data set so they can be compared to previously analyzed data. You use the neighbor embedding a basis, and I cannot tell you all exactly how it works because we put a patent, and right now is a patent pending. So what I can tell you is that embed, so let's take the input space. So basically your parameters, so CD4, CD8, whatever marker you put. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna be using the nearest neighbor, and we're gonna try to figure out what's the closer nearest neighbor to every given cell based on the measurement physically done. So your CD4, CD8. So here's the cells that we found the cluster, and we're just gonna give you a score based on the distance between the other cells. Now we're gonna move to the output space. So the new sample, and we're gonna try to find out the the t-SNE score for those 3 cells, and make the average of that by extrapolation and make sure that the value of these orange cells now can be put really at the right place compared to the other one. So the position of the orange cells in this dimensional array is defined by the weight position of its nearest neighbor from the D in the R. We included some measurement of goodness. We put, you're gonna have an input quality score and an output quality score. And the input quality score is gonna be the average normalized distance and the nearest neighbor in the original dimension. And basically imagine that you have done another experiment and a new cell show up and that there's no nearest neighbor from these cells. So we're still gonna try to put these cells to the closest of the 3 other cells that you have in your sample, but this cell is gonna be really far away from the other one. So your score, your input quality score is gonna be a really big number. And if it is a big number, that means just the cells is really far away from any other cells that you had in your sample. So you can just ignore those cells that have a really high input quality score. So you can just get them out, or you can just the other way, get those cells that have a really high score and see what those cells are manually to see what's going on there, why they are so different compared to the other one. And the output is just the opposite. So how to run embed in FlowJo. So embed is native. So you just go in your workspace, population, and you're gonna find embed. You're gonna create your embed on your previously run population. So here was my tube 1 where I did all my analysis. So I ran my embed on my population 1. I'm gonna tell my target embedded parameter. So here, in this case, my UMAP. And after, I'm just gonna select the parameter that I want to include there in the existing target sample. So I'm gonna select all the parameter, or I can just select few parameter if my 2 panels don't exactly match. So here, select everything. Then, of course, I want to calculate the input quality score, output quality score. I can set the training set size or increase, decreasing to make it more or less take times, and after a few other things, and click accept. When I click accept, it's gonna create this embed node. It's gonna tell me it's ready to drag to the new sample. So now I have my new sample, for example, this unknown tube B1, and I just click and drag my embed on this unknown tube B1, and it's gonna automatically recreate my T-Rex UMAP1, UMAP2. And here it was my UMAP before on my real sample, the one I ran before, and here is my UMAP on my new set of sample I get, and I can really see that this new set of sample, I really have those cluster present, this one, but I'm missing the one here on top, and mostly this one as well. Okay. So I'm really help you to redo the analysis and exactly put yourself. All right, so with everything we've done, we had the data. That's what we got at the beginning. We sorted our data, we arranged our data, and we presented visually the data to you. But without you, we cannot explain this the full story. So don't worry about your job security. All right, so let's go on the demo and let's show you all those different tools. Share. Stop sharing. Up. Share my other screen. There you go. Move the zoom. Open the chat. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate. And let's open FlowJo. So I'm just gonna open FlowJo where I already run UMAP, some clustering algorithm. I think if I remember correctly, I ran XShift and FlowSum on it. Okay. So I have my 4 sample. There are 13 colors, so nothing crazy. It was basically a DR panel. So we have viability dye, we have a lineage where we remove T cells, B cells, we have our HRDR marker, we have CD14, CD16, and some cytokines marker. Okay, so we clean up our sample, we run FlowAI, we did a manual cleanup to select our DR population. We make sure that we had an annotation based on our condition. So here we have an annotation based on the patient ID and based on the stimulation. We did concatenate. Of course, before that, also, I did make sure that my transformation are good. So if I look at my scale, everything, all the scales have been adjusted. Then we did concatenate our sample. So here's my concatenated sample. And on my concatenated sample, I did run my FlowSum, EggShift, UMAP, and TSNE in this case. So double click, I see my UMAP. Okay, my different UMAP and my different population. All right, so what do I do now? So first, as we talk about Cluster Explorer. So Cluster Explorer is in the workspace. Now Cluster Explorer, I can click on it. I can select which dimensional reduction I use. So I have my UMAP, TSNE. Do I want to visualize both of them? Yes or no. If I just want to see UMAP, I can remove my TSNE. I can show both. I'm just gonna show the UMAP in this case. Do I want to my clustering algorithm? Do I want to see EggShift? Do I want to see FlowSum? So there's a question. Alex, just contact the FlowJo at bd.com. They're gonna help you with your issue with your toggle notification. We can select which parameter we want to visualize in our Cluster Explorer. So I'm just going to put every marker except DR viability lineage because I already remove or select those for analysis manually. So I don't need to visualize those and click OK. Cluster Explorer run. Okay, I get all my different windows. So I have my control panel windows, I have my heat map window, I have my line graph window, I have my cluster size window, and my UMAP. So in the cluster size, I can see the percentage of cells between each cluster. If I want to see the number of cells, I can go in option. I need to select it. There we go. And where's my wait, I don't see it. There you go. We have the normalization and I see the number of cells instead of the percentage. I can click on the different cluster and to see if I click on the cluster 1, it's going to show me which one it is, what's the line, what's the expression of each marker. So I click on cluster 1, I can see that's positive for CD14, a little bit maybe for IL-1 beta, and of everything else is negative. See, represented by 45%, where it's located on my UMAP. You can click on the graph, see that my cluster is 6 right there, we present at 40%, and that's the one that's negative for everything. So there's a question, do all the clustering program perform the same on T, B, and monocyte population? They're all different, they're different algorithm. For those really well expressed populations, or as you said, TB and monocyte, they're all gonna find them. There's no issue with that. If you're really looking for really rare population, egg shift is designed to find really rare population compared to phenograph. Is not, is more general population. So really kind of based on your research, on your scientific question, one may work a little bit better than the other one. A phenograph is the most published clustering algorithm, mostly in sequencing, more than in flow cytometry. So if you try to publish using phenograph, nobody's going to argue why you use phenograph. If you use FlowSum or EggShift, they are mostly used in flow cytometry. So same thing, they're well-known algorithms, so no problem. Just be clear on why you use that and stick it with it, and there's no problem with it. Another question before cluster analysis: do we need to downsample our lineage population to equal number for normalization? So downsample is mostly to make sure that one condition doesn't overload the algorithm compared to another one. So if you have unsimulated, simulated, if you have 10 million cells in the unsimulated and only 1 million cells in the simulated, when you're gonna merge those two conditions and you try to run the algorithm, it's gonna be way harder for the algorithm to find differences between those two conditions, because all the algorithms gonna be way overloaded with the unsimulated condition. So the idea of downsampling is just making sure that you have the same number of cells for each condition. So in this example, 1 million cells for unsimulated and simulated. After, of course, the less cells you have, the faster the algorithm is going to run. So depending also on your computer power. Is there a maximum number of cells for the algorithm that can handle? Really depend of your computer. And the time that you're willing to wait. Sometimes for really like millions and millions of cells, 20 million of cells plus. If you have a really basic computer, it can take several hours, 3-4 hours sometimes. So really depend of the expression of your cells of interest as well. So if you know that your cell of interest is only 0.1%, well, just make sure that you have enough cells for the algorithm to find this population. So usually, let's say you need to have at least 100 cells per cluster. I will say that's a good number to make sure that you find it. The clustering population on scatter on Disney map. What can I do for this problem? So Disney, if you have issue with Disney, it can be really change your iteration, your perplexity. That's the number that you can change. Your perplexity can be from 5 to 50 usually, based on the number of cells you have in your analysis. In flow cytometry, because usually we have a lot of cells, usually we are between 30 to 50 in perplexity. I recommend to use OPSNI, because OPSNI you don't have to change many other parameters, so it's just perplexity and iteration. Iteration in OPSNI is going to stop as soon as it doesn't find any optimization of the doing more calculation. So you can put a big number on the iteration. It's not a big deal. If at 500 iteration, it doesn't find any improvement, it's just gonna stop at 500, even if you put 2000. And try to do that. Also your scales. Your scale is also a big factor when you if your scales are not great. So if all your cells are close to the negative, you have a lot of white space either in the negative and the positive, your t-SNE is not going to perform well. So make sure that you adjust your scales. Would it be Would it be possible to develop a method for solid and view the data with AI model to highlight the trend comparing different condition and different cluster number result? Well, your question is a little bit like what T-Rex is doing. T-Rex is just going to show you the cluster that changed, and it's going to ignore everything else. So like that, you get it. For clustering, should we ignore forward scalar and side scalar parameter? Yes, mostly yes. There are two a wide range. My answer to that is yes. I know some really few people for specific biology question they include it, but 99.9% of the time ignore forward scalar, side scalar. What's the advantage of using UMAP over T-SNE? It's just two-dimensional reduction. We have like big dimensional reduction currently available in FlowJo. There are pros and cons, all of them. UMAP has a little bit more global structure, keep the global structure a little bit more preserved than T-SNE. T-SNE explode more the cells, so depend of your scientific question. If, for example, you're just interested in T cells population, that's your question. Maybe you want more, you're probably going to use T-SNE because it's going to show you more different islands, so maybe the different populations. So try to maybe characterize different cell type, different T-Rex cell type. UMAP is more like the distance between each island has some kind of meaning. So that means if two islands are really close together, that means the cells are really similar to each other. When T-SNE, the distance between each island have no meaning. So maybe UMAP, if you want to have a big picture of your cell population, UMAP might be better. So it's two different kind of algorithm, not a big, really depend of what you're looking for. Okay, question keep coming. I'm gonna answer those. Cytec mixing is almost always giving extreme negative value for some markers. I've seen it really painful trying to use that data for clustering. What can I do? Not use Cytec instrument? No serious answer. Try to optimize the scales on the unmixing. You should have normally, you can click on the your T button on FlowJo to adjust your scale. So you go here, customize axis, and after you can adjust here, not on a UMAP. If I go something else, let's go to L6, for example, T button, customize axis, and here you can change to different type of scales. So usually what you see is by exponential. You can adjust your by exponential to remove or to add some negative decade, or you can just use different type of scale. So arcs and edge is one more use in the field, especially to really bin the data, do a better job to bin the data. So try maybe to look at the different scale. And when you find the scales that you like, you can go in your preferences of the instrument, go in cytometer. And if you have your Cytec here, you can adjust also your scales right there. So change it with bases, etc. And also Cytec show you edge W, and sometimes it's a little bit annoying in FlowJo. You can put some filtering to remove those. When I run T-Rex and population do not add up to 100%, is this expected? Yes, the different cluster of T-Rex is not gonna be add up to 100% because it's just gonna cluster only the population of the cell that change between the different conditions. So it's just gonna show the cluster that appear, disappear, and everything that's not changing, it's just gonna totally ignore, and that's the gray population that gives you. I'll show you live when I stop answering all those questions. But all right, so we have Cluster Explorer, so we can really explore those different population. we can create gates. So if I want to create gates, we can say, for example, I just want to see my cluster that are IL1 beta positive, so I can gate around it. And here's an AND gate. So I see my two clusters that are L1 beta positive. I can do AND gate, NOT gate. So I'm gonna do AND gate and IL12. And I see, and that's cluster number 5. And for you, it can be CD4, CD8, whatever marker you want there. Can clear the gate. And here I just see everything in X shift. You can change that. I can see the flow sum result, for example, and see the differences. So I can see that this cluster in X shift flow sum is which one in flow sum. If we merge cluster and cluster, is there a possibility to save this for the next time cluster is open, or is everything lost when closing Cluster Explorer? No, Cluster Explorer doesn't save anything. So when you do anything in Cluster Explorer, if you name, merge, or whatever within Cluster Explorer, you cannot. It's not gonna save. You can always do it here if you want to rename it or merge, but now you can merge with mem as well. So no need there. Or you can just use a Boolean gate in your workspace. Where's my Boolean gate? No, I changed the space. Yeah, tools. So if those two clusters are the same, you can just say Boolean gate make OR gate. All right, so for Cluster Explorer, first thing I forgot even before opening Cluster Explorer is separate based on our condition. So let's go for our annotation. So my simulation keyword can put an histogram, so I can see my non-simulated and simulated sample. I can right click, create gate on peak, create my two population 0, which is my nose team. I'm gonna rename nose team. Okay, and here rename, that's my TLR steam population. All right, so now I can go to Cluster Explorer. Again, wanted to go too fast. Select again, I'm just gonna put X shift, I don't need. Flow sum, remove what I don't need as a parameter to visualize. And here I can see the different population. Okay, so we were here. Okay, up. So right now I'm saying my 20,000 cells on everything on my concatenate file, but I can decide to see only the cluster that come from my nose team and steam. And you can see that really the cluster are changing drastically in my UMAP and see where they appear and disappear. Okay, so big change here that really show you the differences there. We realize, I'll show you that the column from Cluster Explorer in the native version, we forgot to put it back. We realized that was a missing part of Cluster Explorer compared to the plugins, and we're gonna patch that in the 10.9.1 that's gonna be released this fall. So we still have the Cluster Explorer plugins available if it's really needed for you to add those columns. But let's jump to T-Rex. So instead of just doing all my UMAP, T-SNE, Cluster Explorer, clustering algorithm, X shift, or flow sum, let's go directly by starting from scratch. You just have your two condition, and we're gonna run our T-Rex population. So we run our T-Rex plugins. T-Rex plugin, we're gonna select our parameter. So our parameter, let's select everything but the marker already, get them out. I'm gonna select my pre-treatment, which is my nose team. I'm gonna select my post-treatment, which is my TLR team. I'm gonna change my K number to over cluster or under cluster. So I'm just gonna increase that number to under cluster a little bit. T-Rex, we're still trying to figure out what's the best number here for the K and the epsilon number. With right now, if you leave the default, is really gonna over cluster a lot. So it seems like we need to increase that number a little bit. I'm just gonna change the epsilon number. I'm just gonna put it at 1 as well. Same thing to reduce the number of cluster that's gonna give me. The bin, as I said, what I'm interesting is whatever is represented to 0 to 15% or 85 to 95%. So 85 to 100%, sorry. Everything that's between 15 to 80%, I'm just gonna ignore. You can change that if that's too drastic for your experiment. You can change this number here. Do I want to run UMAP? Do I want to run Disney? I'm just gonna keep it on UMAP. Click run. My T-Rex is running. It's gonna take about 1 minute or so to run on this sample. Always feels slow when you're waiting for the results, but you'll get there pretty soon. What is the appropriate interpretation of phenograph algorithm? Can you extrapolate your question? Phenograph is just an algorithm that can cluster, so you have many of them. So it's gonna just give you a cluster like flow sum, X shift. It's just a little bit. It's almost the army knife of clustering algorithm. So it's gonna work for everything, but it's not the best for everything either. So that was your question. All right, so we have our T-Rex. So now we have our T-Rex UMAP, okay, and we have our T-Rex cluster 1 to 6. So we also, if we go in our folder, in the plugin folder, we have our T-Rex folder, and within our T-Rex folder, we have an output folder, and with the output folder, I'm just gonna put as gallery, will be nicer. What you can see this color coded as I show you. Yeah, it's color coded. We can see that this population right there is way overrepresented in my no steam condition in blue. Okay, everything in blue is overrepresented in my no steam. Everything in red is overrepresented in my steam conditions. I can really target the cluster and which one are which. It's gonna give me another output, which are my 6 cluster that is just defined based on what's expressed in which condition. And so it's cluster 1, cluster 2, 3, 4. I can see exactly which one are which. And after it's gonna give me some heat map, color-coded heat map, where I can see which marker are expressed in this different marker. Okay, and here also. Okay. So here's the output that you can get. You can also do it with, of course, your layout editor. Just gonna create a new layout. I don't know why there's already a layout open. So I can click and drag my image here. Again, make it smaller. I can put my Disney as well in it. Okay, so open here, my T-Rex UMAP 1, T-Rex UMAP 2. You can see that. Again, I copy this image to my layout. And here I can just right click, make multi-graph color mapping, select my different markers, click choose, and see the different marker express. In this case, I can duplicate that if I want. I can overlay my T-Rex marker on it. To see where they are, where they're located. Okay. And here in this example, it was really like a drastic difference between the two conditions. So of course, you find almost every cells present there, but for you, it just may be with a few cluster as we saw. Okay. All right, but those are just a number cluster 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We just want to name those with a real name. There's a question. Can I run T-Rex program on subpopulation of concatenated file just like STL population with different time? Yes. Yeah, I think there's no issue with that. I just need to find the population. So if you create your concatenation, create different population, yes, you can run those T-Rex on it. Which plugin you show actually running with that or Python installation on the computer? The only plugin I show you is T-Rex, and T-Rex doesn't need no Python. So everything else was native. What the step before was UMAP. UMAP was a R-based plugin. Disney is native. So. All right, so we want to name those cluster. So we're gonna select those T-Rex cluster. We're gonna select mem, and we're gonna create mem score. And here mem score, we're gonna select which parameter we want to include in our mem score. So I'm gonna select everything but the one that's not needed. I can decide what's the reference. So I can decide for the MM auto reference, or I can define a reference for me. So if I know, for example, that I have an unstained sample that's really well defined, I can just select that and say that's my cluster 6, for example. That's my unstained cluster. What everything is negative, so I'm just gonna select this one for my baseline for my reference. Can do that. I can just set the automatic. And after I can say my QR number and my threshold. So threshold 0 to 10 plus or minus, remember, so usually we start with 1, so like that you see the vector. So I'm just gonna run it like that with the auto reference, click OK, and it's starting, it gave me a name. Okay. So if I look at the name, I can see that CD14 positive with a vector of 10, so really CD14 positive, so that's my probably my monocyte, IL10 positive vector of 1, CD83 positive vector of 1, etc. So I can see here that's my CD123 positive if with a vector of 2, so that's probably my DC in the cluster 4. Here on cluster 2, that's my CD14 positive vector of 3, CD16 positive vector of 2, so my double positive on CD14 and CD16, etc., etc. So I can really name my different population. If I think that list is too big, you can just say rename mem node and just increase the threshold, for example, to 2, because I don't want to see everything. That's 1. Click OK, 2, and I can see now the first one is my CD14, second one is double positive CD14, 16. Cluster 4 is my DCs, and 5 and 6 is mostly a negative cluster. All right, a few more questions. Okay, where can I find your previous webinar? If you go on our website, FlowJo.com, go and learn webinar, And at the end, you're gonna have a recorded webinar, and you're gonna have the list of the past, I believe, 2 years of webinar that we have there. So you can find many different webinars on FlowJo, so introduction of FlowJo, advanced FlowJo, very specific topic. You can find it also on our FlowJo YouTube page as well. The phenograph you're using Leuven, that's the question. All right, so we have the scores. So now let's pretend we're happy with the analysis. We're done. We have the analysis, and we have a new sample. Someone, maybe a collaborator, after we publish, send you a new patient sample and say, "Hey, can you check with your analysis?" Yes, Nikita too. Mem work with TRX. I just did it on TRX. Right there on my TRX cluster. Yes, you can use on any other cluster. If I want to do it on XShift, I can just select XShift, mem, do exactly the same. Doesn't matter which cluster algorithm you run. Leave it default. Or I can just take a reference, and we saw that 6 seems to be the negative for everything. Click OK, and here I have the name. Right. And if I want to merge, because those two mem score, for example, are like same score, there's nothing there, I can always go merge a node on that have the same mem score. And you're just gonna create a new cluster on new population with those cluster 5 and 6 together. All right, so we were saying we are a few months later, maybe a new patient's coming from my study, or maybe just a collaborator after I published send me a new data set and ask me to look at it with my analysis. So let's go for the data. Let's try to find this data, 13 color right there. Just put it like that, maybe nicer. And here is my population. So my nose team again, my team, that's my patient 3. I had only patient 1 and 2, if you remember here, patient 1 and 2, nose team's team. So I did concatenate those two samples to make it one patient ID 3 concat. So I'm just gonna put it in my workspace. So click and drag that to my workspace. Okay, so now I have my patient 3 right there in my concat, so 2 sample. Can close that. And I want to run the exact same UMAP that I run. So either my T-Reg UMAP, or just my regular UMAP that I did run at the beginning. So on my previous sample, I'm just gonna click on unbed. So I select here, go on unbed. I'm gonna select which target embed parameter I want to select. So my UMAP, so as I say, the TRX UMAP or just regular UMAP, let's put the regular UMAP. And after which parameter I need to include for my next target sample. So I can select everything I want, and same thing, I can remove DR viability and lineage because I don't need those. Calculate input, output, yes, and I'm gonna leave everything as default. You can force cells to be placed in a cluster or not. I say if you're really sure that he has to be in a cluster, you can check that. But remember, with your input output, you know exactly if maybe a cell is outside your cells of interest. Click run. It creates my embed. It said ready to drag my next population. So now I take my embed node and click and drag it on my PID3 population. Okay, it's calculating. And there you go, it's done calculating, and it created my UMAP parameter, the same one as the one on the webinar. So if I open now my patient ID 3, I can look at my UMAP 1, UMAP 2, and I can see the result and see how it compares. So here it's not the same UMAP, it's this one that I use, UMAP 1, UMAP 2, and where it falls in those clusters compared to that one. So see that, oops, sorry, up there, you see that all the clusters are present in this patient ID3, same as my other patient. And you can do that for, of course, a dimensional reduction, but you can do also for clustering algorithm. For clustering algorithm, so for a dimensional reduction, so we're gonna try to see the distance between each other cells. For clustering algorithm, when you do embed for clustering algorithm, it's just gonna be a yes or no answer. Is it cluster 1 or is it cluster 2? Is it cluster 3? And we're gonna try to calculate. We're gonna say, okay, on the 10 times you calculate, 9 times it was cluster 1 and 1 time it was cluster 2 because it was 9 times cluster 1 instead of just doing an average of like a cluster 1.1, which is not what we want because it was 9 times cluster 1. We're just gonna put it in cluster 1. And we're gonna ignore the cluster 2, the 1 time we find it as clusters. And we're gonna do that for every cells and every cluster. All right, we are on the 1 hour benchmark there. We're supposed to finish. So I think I'm gonna wrap up here. Happy to answer any question if you have any left. But basically that was the step after just doing your dimensional reduction and clustering algorithm. All right, so question, we had issue with SNE where concat file produce different t-SNE plot when run different time. Should this be expected? Doesn't happen. Yes, every time you run a t-SNE, because it's the algorithm run, it's gonna feed the different cells at the beginning at different place in your graph. So your t-SNE graph may look different every time you run it. So that's totally expected. With the native t-SNE in FlowJo, we try to keep the same kind of seeding every time. So it should look pretty similar, but it cannot look exactly the same. And that's the reason we concatenate all the samples at the beginning before running our algorithm. So yes, it's expected. You say you didn't see it in uncompensated, it's probably just because you didn't see much differences, but with the native is we try to keep it similar and also make sure that your scaling is correct. That can be also a big difference between your uncompensated and compensated. If you want to add a new sample to a bigger data set after some time, does it make sense to concatenate everything again and then use embed to do the analysis again? Yeah, I think, yes. So you can use embed in different way. So you can use embed by just running. You downsample a lot your sample just to have the map basically, and you run everything on really few sample like I did today on 20,000 sample. Maybe it's enough to see all your different cell population, but because you recorded like 50,000 cells for each sample, maybe it's worth to run embed some on those real sample, because we're just gonna try to map everything and make sure you didn't miss a really rare population. That can be one way to do it. Or as I show, just to add more samples if you know that it's gonna be a longitudinal study. You have enough representation of your different cell population you expect. And now you can just add more sample again and again with embed. So yeah, either or. I think embed is really gonna change a lot the way we think about high parameter analysis now that we can add more samples to an existing analysis. So I think just time will tell, but yeah, I don't see why you cannot do that. What time does this become data? We can import it into a statistical package. You can export everything as, I don't know what you mean by a statistical package, but yes, everything is, everything is math. So you can export that and run it through R if you want, just FlowJo, make it visually more appealing and more easy if you don't have any coding skills. But and after, of course, when you have everything, all the results, of course you want to go to a statistical analysis. And after, you can do that by just creating a table and put everything you want in your table editor. So you can export MFI, frequency of population. You can do complex formula in your table editor, and after visualize that in any statistical packages you want. All right. Don't seem to have more questions. So there's no more question. That's going to be the end of this webinar. If you didn't catch my emails, or if you want to contact me for any reason, just I closed it already. Look, don't hesitate to reach out to me at this email, nicolas.loof@bd.com. Okay. And if you have any issues, or there was some question on the dongles not be able to authenticate, just email FlowJo@bd.com. They will be happy to help you there. Or plugin installation also. That's a good. Better to email FlowJo@bd.com than myself. They will be way more reactive to answer those. All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day or